For most of my life, I thought my relationship with food would change once I finally figured out the right strategy, the right way to eat, the right balance, the right amount of discipline. I thought then I would finally feel calm, happy, confident, in control. But that shift that actually changed everything didn't come from changing what I ate. It came from changing who I believed I was around food and even in general. And I want to be really clear about this from the start. This wasn't about pretending to be confident. It wasn't about forcing positivity. And it definitely wasn't about becoming some perfect healed version of myself. It was about an identity shift. An identity-based change is the only kind of change that actually lasts. So in this video, I want to walk you through how my old food identity was formed, why strategies never stuck, what identity really means in this context, how this links to manifestation in a grounded way, and how you can start practicing this shift without forcing or faking anything. And this is a huge part of becoming her, the version of you you always wanted to be and actually are deep down. So well then, let's talk about where my food identity came from. I didn't wake up one day and decided to have a complicated relationship with food. It formed slowly, through diet culture, praise for control, shame around overeating, being told certain foods were bad, learning that my body needed managing. And this wasn't just through my personal life. Obviously, we see so much of this in media, social media, and all kind of media. So over time, I started to see myself as someone who struggled with food, someone who couldn't fully trust herself, someone who needed rules to stay in control. And even when things were going well, that identity was still running in the background. And my thoughts sounded like, I need to be careful today. I hope I don't mess this up. I will try to be good. I can't let myself slip. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to lose weight. And here's what matters. Identity isn't just what you say about yourself. It's what your nervous system expects from you. So even when I ate normally, my body stayed tense. I was bracing, waiting, managing myself. And this is where things clicked for me, especially thanks to reading James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, where he talks about identity-based change, plus a book called Psycho-Cybernetics from Maxwell Walls, which is even more focused on identity. But yeah, I don't want to go too much on a tangent here. If you're ever interested in what kinds of books helped me on my journey, I'm happy to do a future episode on that or something around that. Plus, I recently learned it's not just non-fiction books that can be life-changing. But yeah, I'm still going on a tangent, so let's move on. Well then, I realized that my behaviors weren't random. There were logical responses to the identity I was living inside. So if you see yourself as someone who struggles with food, then overeating feels like proof. Cravings feel dangerous, mistakes feel personal, control feels necessary. So of course you overthink food, swing between control and collapse, restart instead of continue, feel anxious around food. Not because you lack willpower, but because you're acting in alignment with who you believe you are. And this behavior-based change doesn't last, because behavior follows identity, always. I tried so many things that worked temporarily: meal plans, intuitive eating rules, balanced plates, mindset shifts. Each one helped for a while, but eventually I ended up back in the same place. And it wasn't because the strategies were wrong. It was because they were layered on top of an identity that still believed food was risky, mistakes meant failure, control was safety, freedom had to be earned. So every strategy became another test. And tests always come with pressure. You cannot out-strategy an identity. You will always revert to who you believe you are under stress, especially. The turning point that came, the moment I realized this was an identity issue, it was quiet. I noticed that even when I was doing everything right, I didn't feel free. I felt watched by myself. I was eating but monitoring, choosing but evaluating, enjoying but waiting for guilt. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't living as someone who trusted herself around food. I was living as someone who was managing herself around food. And that distinction changed everything. When people hear identity shift, they often think it means faking confidence, declaring affirmations, forcing a new persona. And that's not what this is about. Identity shift isn't something you declare, it's something you practice. It's not like, I'm healed now. It's, how does that version of me I'm becoming respond here? Identity changes through repetition and not intention. And this is where I want to gently touch on manifestation, because I used to think manifestation was honestly a bit too much, and well, many make it seem like it's something very woo, and then you just think and you get and I don't know what. And I don't really want to get deep with it, but yeah, the idea of thinking differently and magically changing your life didn't sit right with me. But then I reframed it. The only part of manifestation that actually matters is this: be, do, have. Most of us live in do, have, be. I control my food, then I lose weight, then I feel confident. But identity-based change flips that. You become the version of yourself who trusts herself, and then your actions change, and then your outcomes follow. Not because of magic, but because your behavior aligns with identity. And that's the grounded truth behind manifestation, in my opinion. The identity that changed everything for me was simple. I stopped seeing myself as someone who struggled with food and instead started practicing being someone who responds to herself with support. This showed up in small moments, eating past fullness and not punishing myself, having cravings and pausing instead of panicking, continuing the next meal instead of compensating, choosing care instead of correction. Each moment was a vote, not for perfection, but for identity, for the identity I was hoping to become, or I was on the journey to become. And once that identity began to settle, my behavior changed without force. Food stopped feeling like a threat, mistakes stopped feeling like emergencies, progress stopped feeling fragile, not because I became disciplined, but because I became consistent in how I treated myself. And consistency is an identity, not a strategy. And if this feels uncomfortable, that makes sense. It's, as so many things, easier said than done because your nervous system likes what it is familiar, even if it hurts. So when you stop controlling food the old way, your body might panic. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're stepping out of a pattern your brain knows all too well. So identity shifts require safety and not force. The next time something feels messy with food, ask yourself, how does the woman I'm becoming respond here, and not what should I do, but how do I stay with myself? That might mean eating normally instead of restricting, grounding instead of distracting, continuing instead of restarting. This is how identity is built, one response at a time. And I want to make this even more tangible for you, because identity shifts don't happen because you understand something. They happen because you practice responding differently in small moments. So here's a simple way to start. No journaling marathons, no perfection required. Step number 1, name your current food identity without judging it. Take a moment and notice what identity you've been operating from around food. You can also do this for anything, yeah? So it might sound like, I'm someone who can trust herself. I always mess up. I need rules to stay in control. If I'm not careful, I will lose control. This isn't about shaming yourself, it's about awareness. And awareness is always the first step to change, because you can't shift an identity that you haven't named. Then step number 2, define the identity you're practicing, not becoming overnight, the one your goal is, but you know that it takes step by step. So ask yourself, what would it feel like to be someone who responds to herself with support instead of control? Not someone who eats perfectly, but someone who doesn't panic after overeating, continues instead of restarting, chooses care over correction, trusts that one moment doesn't define her. That's the identity, not healed, not fixed, just supported. Then step number 3, pick one moment to practice this. So you don't want to practice this all day, because this is important. Don't try to directly be the version of you all the time. This is very overwhelming and will lead to burning out. So pick one moment per day, maybe after dinner, during a craving, the morning after you overate. And in that moment ask, how does the woman I'm becoming respond here? Then respond once from that place. That's it. Step number 4, let repetition do the work. This is where most people quit too early. Identity doesn't shift because you do this perfectly. It shifts because you do it consistently. Each time you don't punish yourself, don't restrict to compensate, don't spiral into shame, you're teaching your nervous system something new. And your nervous system is what actually holds that identity. This works because you're no longer trying to control your behavior. You're teaching your body, I stay with myself even when things are messy. And that's what changes patterns long term. And that's identity-based change, not intensity, not motivation, not pressure. It's repetition and safety. So for me and many others, this shift lasted because it wasn't built on rules. It was built on trust, practice trust. That grows when you stop abandoning yourself. And that's why my relationship with food changed. Not because I found the perfect plan, but because I became someone who no longer needed food to prove anything. So if you're stuck with food, I want you to hear this. You're not failing because you haven't found the right strategy. You're stuck because your identity hasn't been given space to change yet. And identity-based change is the only kind that lasts. This is becoming her, not the perfect version, but the steady one. And you don't have to figure this out on your own. This is exactly the work we do inside the Nourish Method. The Nourish Method is my 16-week framework designed to help you stop the binge-restrict cycle, rebuild trust with food and your body, regulate your nervous system instead of relying on control, and practice that identity shift you heard about in this video consistently and not perfectly. This isn't a diet, it's not about willpower, it's not about becoming a new person overnight. It's about practicing being the version of you who knows how to respond instead of punish. By the time you're watching this, the Nourish Method is also available both as supported personal experience and as a self-study option, so you can choose the level of support that fits your life right now. And if you've been telling yourself, I get it, but I don't know how to apply it on my own, or if you feel like you need the accountability, this is the next step. You will find all the details linked in the description below. And if this video helped you see your relationship with food differently, please hit that like and subscribe button, maybe even the notification bell, because it really helps these kinds of messages to get out there versus all the nonsense that gets seen way too often. And tell me in the comments, what identity have you been living in around food, even if you never chose it consciously? Remember, you're not broken, you're becoming. Lots of love, and I will see you in the next video.